everybody. Beth and I would like to welcome you to this webinar, during which we plan to describe a comprehensive curriculum and assessment solution that can help to place young children on the path to success. That is going to be our key word for today, or our keywords for today, the path to success. The solution integrates the InvestiGator Club and the work sampling system. And before we move forward, we'd like to provide some information about the InvestiGator Club and the work sampling system. We'd like to let you know that I am, as Sherry said, employed by Pearson, the publisher of the work sampling system, one of the tools on which we'll focus today. And Beth Weiss is employed by Robert Leslie Publishing, the publisher of the InvestiGator Club. And Pearson Clinical Assessment is the sponsor of this presentation. Before we get started with the content, I wonder if you could provide us with some information related to you. Can you let us know which of the following best captures your role? If you select the one that applies and then click Submit, you'll be able to get a sense of who is in our audience today. It's always complex when you're speaking to a group and you have no visual contact with the group, so getting some feedback about your role might help us to think about this in a more personal way. I'm going to give just a few seconds more here for the responses to come through. We have a number of teachers, early childhood educators, administrators, several psychologists, several university trainers. I think in terms of the breakdown, at least from the respondents, early childhood educators and preschool teachers. Thank you so much for responding. What we'd like to cover today are really three major topics. We'll begin with a brief description of the path to success. And following that brief description, we will describe the curriculum component, which is the InvestiGator Club, and this will be followed by a description of the work sampling system assessment. And then finally, what we'd like to do is conclude with a look at the integrated curriculum and assessment solution, which is the integration of work sampling and the InvestiGator Club. So let's think for a second about the path to success for young children. In 1995, and as I was thinking about this, I was reflecting on where I was in 1995 when the National Education Goals Panel described the 5 dimensions that theoretically would foster early learning and development, and that would ensure, you'll remember, that by the year 2000, all children would start school ready to learn. And when we looked at the 5 dimensions, the dimensions included certainly physical development, when you're thinking about large motor movements that allow children to run and jump and skip. You're also thinking about fine motor development, or the small motor movements that are required to hold a crayon, to maybe put together puzzles, to write. Also thinking about the social emotional development, thinking about ensuring that young children develop those self-efficacy components that are so important, the self-confidence, and also thinking about the ability to function as a member of a group. Also thinking about the importance of approaches to learning, making sure that we're fostering children's curiosity, creativity, independence, cooperativeness, persistence, and so on. And we also want to make sure that we enable young children to develop the ability to communicate effectively with their peers as well as with adults, And we also want to make sure that we foster emergent literacy when you're thinking about beginning literacy or linking the oral language to the written language. And then finally, the fifth dimension was cognition, where the National Education Goals Panel described the importance of providing young children with opportunities to interact with individuals and materials in their environment in order for them to develop the ability to see cause and effect, to be able to reason, to think, and to engage in problem solving. And these 5 broad areas of learning really reflect research-based expectations for learning and development. And they emphasize the key skills, the knowledge, the behaviors that programs should foster. When you think about high-quality, developmentally appropriate programs, you're thinking about what those programs foster in children ages birth to 5 to enable them to be successful in school and life. So I want us to keep in mind these 5 dimensions as we move forward. Because when you think about early childhood programs, you think about preschool programs, there are a number of questions that we ask. There are a number of questions that come to mind when we think about early childhood programs. But I want to focus on 2 of those questions for purposes of our presentation today. The first question has to do with content. What should we teach? What should we teach young children? What should we teach young children that would enable them to be successful in school? So what should we teach? That has to do with the curriculum. And then the second question that is related, highly interrelated with the first, is how will we know that children are learning what it is that we teach? And that is the assessment component. So our webinar today will focus on these 2 major questions. What should we teach? And we want to use a specific curriculum to describe what we should teach. And then we'll look at the assessment component. We'll talk about how we know whether or not children are learning what we teach. So now I'd like to turn it over to Beth, who will tell us about the curriculum, the InvestiGator Club.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being here today. If there's a little bit of noise in the background here, please excuse me. We've got thunderstorms coming through, and there's all kinds of noise in the back, so excuse me for that. But welcome, and welcome to the InvestiGator Club curriculum. So shortly, I just want to talk a little bit about what it is and how it works just in a quick few minutes. The InvestiGator Club inquiry-based learning system. If I had to describe the InvestiGator Club in just a few words, I would say comprehensive, balanced, research-based, flexible, inquiry-based learning, proven, inclusive, and engaging. The InvestiGator Club is comprehensive. It covers all 10 learning domains with all the components and all the teacher support that were needed for a full year of instruction. The research-based part of this is very extensive. The InvestiGator Club is based on scientific research and is carefully designed to produce measurable gains in student achievement, which is what Gloria was talking about, getting these gains to the children, making sure that they're on the right path. So we did our research based on that very thing. Drs. Craig Ramey and Dr. Sharon Ramey personally guided the development of the research base for this program. They're renowned researchers and experts in early childhood research and development. So they did this extensive research for the activities that form the curriculum. This is substantial and informational research base, and it can also be found in a booklet called The Foundations for Early Learning, the InvestiGator Club research base. So we started with that research base, but that wasn't enough. We continue to have ongoing research. We know that research changes. We know that we find out new things periodically about brain research and how children are developing. And those things are always taken into consideration and add to this program to make sure that we're approaching it the right way for teachers and students. As we did the research on this, on the program, we had an independent research organization, the Educational Research of America, who conducted a year-long longitudinal study with over 500 students to test the effectiveness of this program. So not only does it have a very strong research base, but we know from this year-long study that the research to it and the effectiveness of it is proven. We used in this study, we showed that we had significant improvement in each of the 10 learning domains and in each subgroup of people tested, which included the total group of children, children of different ethnic backgrounds, children who received special services, those who were economically advantaged or disadvantaged, as well as both boys and girls in this program. A very effective program. Now, the program is balanced, and when I say balanced, I'm saying that it has both very active child-centered learning going on in this program, as well as teacher-directed instruction. The program is flexible in many ways. One of them is that the teacher's guide itself is set up to be very flexible with lesson plans that have built-in staff development features. So the flexibility supports teachers of varying levels of experience and knowledge about best practices in early child education, as well as the flexibility for children of different levels to learn at their best. The program is built on inquiry-based learning, which is a key point for us. The InvestiGator Club builds upon children's natural curiosity about the world and their place in it. Purposeful inquiry is what we call it, and it's at the very heart of the InvestiGator Club. It awakens the scientist and the explorer in every child. Child learn to use their senses, ask questions, and find answers in a supportive, print-rich environment, just like real scientists do. And that knowledge about science and inquiry not only applies to children as they are learning science, but it really applies to all the problem solving and thinking and exploring in every content area. The program is an inclusive program as well. The InvestiGator Club Inclusive Program provides the tools and the support to help teachers welcome all children, that they're on the road to success, and to differentiate the instruction to meet individual needs. We do that in many ways, but including specific modifications and adaptations and tips for children who are learning English, children with special needs, children who just learn differently, or children at different stages in their development. And then last but not least is that this program is very engaging. Children get to join the investigators for lots of engaging new adventures that make everything about learning fun. This program begins with a story. My Disney background and the other author on this program came from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So the importance of story and characters became a critical piece for us to learn. The power of story and the importance of characters is clearly a defining characteristic in this program and a main source of engagement and fun. In this program, there are 7 characters who form a club called the InvestiGator Club. They do that so that they can solve problems and they can tackle tough problems and they can investigate their world. And while they're doing that, there are these unique things going on in the background. Part of them is that as they start to do storytelling characteristics with the characters, techniques of the characters, they become active participants in telling stories. Not just the teachers telling stories, but the kids are part of the problem solving, part of the storytelling. They can talk then about events from different perspectives. They can make predictions and solve problems and do all those things because they're part of this club that likes to investigate. And here are the characters that are in the InvestiGator Club. As children get to know these characters, they quickly relate to the important values and life lessons that the investigators explore all year long, like don't give up and believe in yourself and look out for your friends. Those characteristics, the social and emotional characteristics, are tied into all the content that we teach. But it's a very, very strong characteristic because children become engaged. They build social and emotional characteristics. They can look at things from a different vantage point. And they just find a bit of themselves in the characters and a bit of themselves in this program. So we go way into depth with the characters and the fun that they're having. So let's take a look inside the InvestiGator Club pre-kindergarten learning system. The big picture is that there are 7 investigators